Now, not long ago, Liam Neeson was asked during an interview with Collider about possibly returning to Star Wars, and was told how fans really wanted to see him come back to the role of Qui-Gon Jinn, to which he replied he hadn't heard that. He hadn't heard that fans wanted him back so badly, and then he went on to ask if Star Wars was even still a thing so much anymore, or if it wasn't maybe fading a bit from the mainstream. And when it was explained it wasn't, that there were actually multiple series coming to Disney Plus, and that one of them was a series about Obi-Wan Kenobi, he was asked if he would return for that, for maybe a flashback or something, or hopefully a Force Ghost scene or two. And thankfully he gave a rather enthusiastic yes, he'd be up for it, which was somehow both a relief and yet a little concerning at the same time. Because he seemed to be genuinely unaware of what the interviewer was even talking about. He seemed to have never heard of the Kenobi series and really thought Star Wars had just sort of gone away as of late. Meaning if he had been contacted about this already, which you really think he would have been, if I was in charge of all this, I would have immediately picked up the phone and called his agent just as soon as Ewan McGregor had signed on the dotted line, followed then by a call to Hayden Christensen. Anyway, if he had been contacted already, he sure hit it really well. And granted, he's an actor, which means he may have been, well, acting. Not to mention, we know other actors have sort of played coy when asked about possibly returning to Star Wars, or said they'd be up for it but hadn't been asked yet. And then they just show up. And they, of course, mainly have to keep quiet because of non-disclosure agreements and not spoiling anything. But again, in this interview, and I'll try to remember to include a link to it in the description below should you want to check out the whole thing, he seemed genuinely surprised to hear about any and all of this, which makes me a little worried that maybe he won't be in the Kenobi series, because you'd think if they wanted him in there, he'd be contacted before they write the scripts and include him, and then find out later on when you're ready to shoot this thing that he's not going to do it. And sure, and maybe likely, the two have such a good working relationship that Lucasfilm feels Liam Neeson will do it whenever they eventually ask him. After all, he did return and lend his voice to Clone Wars a couple times, so it's very, very likely he'd do it again here, especially since they could easily get away with just, again, using his voice when you consider we know that Qui-Gon Jinn cannot fully manifest as a Force Ghost. We learned that in Clone Wars, so they don't even need him in person, unless they wanted to maybe de-age him for some flashbacks, which I certainly wouldn't be opposed to. And so, yeah, there's every chance he's going to be in there, and they just haven't contacted him yet, even though you really think they would have. But one way or another, Qui-Gon Jinn really needs to be in this Kenobi series. I feel it's an absolute must. Because this really should be and needs to be something important. This should be a major event in the life of Obi-Wan Kenobi, or why are we even bothering? It should probably be a sort of turning point where he begins to let go of all the mistakes he and the Jedi made during the Clone Wars. And this then leads to him becoming the Obi-Wan Kenobi we'll see in A New Hope, an Obi-Wan who is ready to let go of all his fear and attachments and to become a Force Ghost, to become more powerful than Darth Vader could possibly imagine. And really here, this series needs to be something more than just an excuse to contrive something where Kenobi and Vader somehow, someway, will meet again just because they think that's what the fans want to see, or for them to get close to having some sort of encounter, or maybe they have some sort of mental encounter or shared vision where they fight each other again. And do keep in mind, when announcing Hayden Christensen was going to be playing Vader in this series, Kathleen Kennedy said we would be getting the rematch of the century. And don't get me wrong, I think Vader and his hunt for Kenobi should be a part of this series, a big part because it allows plenty of the show to move beyond Tatooine and show other places in the galaxy without Kenobi having to leave Tatooine to do it. And I am absolutely thrilled to have Hayden Christensen in the suit and just back in Star Wars in general, and maybe we'll see actual Anakin in flashbacks as well. And if they find a way for these two to have a rematch that makes sense, isn't cheesy, and doesn't break the canon, then I'll certainly be fine with it. Heck, I'll look forward to it even. But as great as seeing a form of Vader vs. Kenobi round 3 could possibly be if done right, the core of the show still needs to be about Kenobi trying to connect with Qui-Gon Jinn, I feel, or that maybe he has lost his way a bit and is questioning everything. And I really think a Last Jedi type storyline would have worked far better here with Kenobi in this series than it did with Luke in Episode 8. And no, I'm not suggesting we get a green milk drinking Kenobi who thinks the Jedi should end, nothing anywhere near that extreme. But he'd certainly have a lot more reason than Luke did to be angry at the Jedi of the prequel era for them letting Palpatine rise to power right under their nose, since, you know, he actually was one of them at the time, and could, in a sense, rightfully, you might say, place the burden of guilt upon himself, especially because he will no doubt feel like he failed Anakin. He even says so right in Revenge of the Sith, And that failure and Anakin's turn pretty much directly led or helped Palpatine secure his position of power. Kenobi would actually have far more reason to ask the questions that we saw Luke asking of himself in The Last Jedi. Did the Jedi try to do too much? Did they think too highly of themselves or overvalue their importance to the galaxy? Did they act like the Force belonged to them? And since he's tucked away in a desert on Tatooine, he can't see what the Empire and the Sith are doing to the galaxy. He can't see just how badly the Jedi are needed once again. And the really funny part here is that if you could rewind time and go back before Episode 8, before that movie sort of took and ruined the name, if you will, and you told me there'd be a series in the not-too-distant future called Kenobi The Last Jedi, I'd probably be absolutely giddy with excitement just at the name alone. But I'd be even more excited once you told me it was all about Kenobi grappling with everything that had happened and facing all these tough questions about the Jedi, all the while failing to be able to commune with Qui-Gon Jinn and complete his training to be a Force ghost. And then you throw in the fact that we'd also be seeing Darth Vader trying to hunt him down, and maybe finding and dealing with a few other Jedi in the meantime. And that it would all culminate with Kenobi eventually going back to when he was young and remembering the lessons taught to him by Qui-Gon Jinn, and that it's likely the key to his enlightenment and becoming again that Kenobi will see in A New Hope. And then he can finally connect with Qui-Gon and begin that training. And it brings everything in Star Wars for this character sort of full circle. And honestly here, and maybe I'm wrong or you disagree, but to me it's obvious what the Kenobi series should be about, and it's so obvious that I can't imagine them screwing it up, which, yeah, means they probably will screw it up. And I'm partly kidding because I do, in theory, really think it's so obvious what to do with this series that they will get it right, and it could easily end up being terrific. I do have a lot of confidence and high hopes here, as long as Qui-Gon Jinn is indeed a part of it, and is an important part of all of this. Because if they do somehow get this whole thing wrong, then it really should be called The Last Jedi, because I think the disappointment level from some fans would be equal to, if not actually surpass, how upset some fans were about Luke in Episode 8. Because even though Luke is my personal favorite character, and I think most Star Wars fans really do love him, Obi-Wan and or Vader may just be the most popular characters out there, and at least according to the polls I do, that is the case. They are easily number 1 and 2. So a series that somehow gets one, or worse yet, both of them wrong, and sees the two maybe forced, no pun intended, into some sort of strange, contrived conflict just because they think that's what all fans want to see, and then we get no Qui-Gon Jinn even though Liam Neeson said he'd be willing to do it, well, that would backfire in spectacular fashion. That would bring a whole new level to the so-called toxic fandom. So I really, really hope, for their sake and the sake of us fans, Lucasfilm knows the potential fire they're playing with here, and they really do what must be done with this series. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Does Qui-Gon Jinn need to be in the Kenobi series, or not? And how do you think Vader and Kenobi should have this rematch of the century as Kennedy said they would? Should it literally happen, or be some sort of dreamlike or vision, or should it just not happen at all? Whatever you think, leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.